We all know that sports and physical activity are incredibly important for our boys. It's how they move, it's how they release energy, they build confidence, and they connect with others. And for many families, it's also a big part of our lives, our rhythm. It's the practices, the games, the weekends on the sidelines. But injuries, especially concussions, are part of that world too. And as parents, we're often left wondering, how serious was that hit? Will they bounce back? What's happening in their brain? And how do I support them through it? And this is exactly what today's guest helps us to understand a little bit better. Paige is very clear and grounded when talking about the things that can feel overwhelming, like trauma, recovery, and brain health. This conversation really stretched my thinking. I learned so much about how sports trauma affects the nervous system, and more importantly, what's possible in terms of recovery and prevention. So, if you're raising a boy who's active, competitive, or just constantly on the move, this episode is essential. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or a coach, you'll walk away with practical insight and a whole new understanding on how to keep boys safe, strong, and emotionally resilient. Let's dive in. Too many boys today feel lost, alone, and misunderstood. Too many parents feel the same. Behind today's troubling statistics is a generation of boys longing to be seen, heard, and valued. And yet the conversation around boys' emotional lives is still far too quiet. This new season of Unlocking the Parenting Code is here to change that. This season, you'll hear more real conversations with young men, more expert voices on boys' mental health, more solo episodes where I share truths I've learned firsthand, and more wisdom from parents walking this road right now. It's time to open our eyes, open our hearts, and become the change our boys need. Boys aren't broken. They're waiting for us to truly see them, hear them, and stand with them. So tune in to Unlocking the Parenting Code for real conversations, real hope, and a new path forward for our boys. It's time. They're ready. Are we? Welcome back to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm your host, Kathy. Today's guest is Paige Roberts, a sports psychology consultant, energy optimization expert, and the founder of Performance Neuro Training. With over 12 years in private practice, Paige blends neuroscience, quantum physics, and integrative medicine to help elite athletes and high performers reset their nervous systems, overcome performance anxiety, and stay in a flow state. A former NCAA athlete herself, Paige's work is deeply personal, shaped by her own experiences with trauma, the loss of close friends to suicide, and a mission to shift the stigma around mental health in sports. She brings a powerful mix of science, soul, and lived wisdom to her work and to our conversation today. Welcome, Paige.
Oh, happy to be here.
So, Paige, your work is clearly driven both by professional expertise and very personal experiences. Can you talk a little bit about, when it was in your background that you knew that this was more than simply a career path, that it was becoming a mission of yours?
Oh man. Well, I got very interested in both the mental and physical aspects of sports injury recovery when I was younger. I had endured some stress fractures in my shins because I was diagnosed later with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means that you have very lax joints. And so, regardless how great the arch was in my feet, I had very mobile joints. So, what happened is my arch would collapse when I was running. And I really enjoyed running, and I was a skier also, but running was really my thing. And so it was after the fact, once I had these horrible stress fractures in my shins, and to the point where on my right leg, my fibula broke off from my foot. So that's the outside bone.
Mhm.
And so I had to go through this whole process of physical therapy and going down to Denver. I was raised in the mountains in Colorado. And so we had to go to these experts to really analyze my gait and to help me retrain my nervous system and my muscles to be able to properly walk, essentially, without putting pressure on my tibias and my fibulas. So that was, of course, very devastating to me as a young runner because I was very good at running. I was a miler, 2-miler, and a 5K runner. And so I was told I would never run again. And they said, you're going to be lucky if you're going to be pain-free walking. And I kind of took that as a challenge of like, no, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to be able to do this again. So that's what introduced me to the physical therapy aspect of things, but it also did the sports psychology aspect. So my mom sought out a sports psych or a social worker in sport. And that's when I first started understanding that there was this mental part of sports and really how to deal with the emotional aspects of that loss in my life at that time. So that's where it really started. And then I went on to college, and I had always had this dream of running, but I still had a lot of pain when I ran. And so I didn't think that I was going to get to run in college until I met the coach at Colorado Mesa University, who was also the exercise physiologist. And I was very interested in exercise science. And so I wanted to major in that. And he assured me that we could create a program for me to cross train, which meant you had to train longer and harder, but still be able to race. And so I was still able to fulfill that dream of getting to run in college, but I had to train differently. So it meant a lot of pool workouts, it meant a lot of elliptical, it meant a lot of different weight training and yoga. And so I got introduced to a lot of concepts there around kind of neurology, physiology, and what all that looked like when it came to athletic injury and being able to get back to a functional space. And then it wasn't until I had a bad car accident that, my swim team school bus crashed also my senior year in high school. We were going to our first meet, and I was a distance swimmer as well, like a distance runner. And our bus driver swerved from hitting a deer. It was very icy. We did a 360, went off an embankment. And at that time, I tore all the muscles in my shoulder, and again was told I would never swim again, but was able to rehab my body to the point where I could teach swimming again and I could still swim for leisure. But I couldn't go as hard because when you lose the muscles in your shoulder to keep your shoulder joint in place, there's really not a lot that you can do. But I was still able to continue to teach swimming because I really loved teaching swimming. And so that occurred also. And so that was my first round with having a concussion. And the thing about that was another mental aspect, but it was also the physical aspect. And so then when I went on to college, I graduated, and then I got into a car accident at 22. And so hit Patrick Rice, went off an embankment, hit a fence, killed a cow. In Colorado, again, you guys are probably like, oh my gosh, Colorado with its icy roads and embankments. So I got another concussion. And so at that time, I was working in a hospital. I was an EKG technician, telemetry monitor, pursuing my master's in exercise science. And it was through that experience of having not being able to sleep from the concussion that I went to all these experts. I was trying to figure it out. I would physically train, do acupuncture, PT. I was doing everything that I thought was right. Even I got very much into supplements and Dr. Daniel Amen's work and change your life, change your brain, change your life, and all that kind of stuff. But that's when I discovered the altered consciousness state trauma reprocessing therapies. And so that changed my trajectory to wanting to do that mental piece, and because that helped me. So it finally calmed my nervous system enough to where I could sleep again. And so I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so then that shifted me to wanting to get my master's in social work, just like the creator of this very specific one that I got put on me, or that I used, which was called brain spotting. So then I was like, oh, well, he's a social worker. I worked with a social worker in sports. And that's who also helped me, was the past one that I worked with in high school. Because he's like, hey, this colleague of mine is doing this thing. Do you want to try it out? I think it can help you. I was like, yes, desperately, yes. And so then changed my whole path to social work. And it was, ironically, I had decided I was going to be a social worker, do all these things. And then I had a friend complete suicide that worked with me on the mountain. And that was the ski hill in Colorado, Steamboat Springs. And it was 10 years after I'd had a college athlete friend. So when I was 19, he was a football player at Colorado Mesa University. He'd taken his life, and they'd taken their lives in the same way, with a hunting rifle. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. Why do athletes complete suicide? And so that was right when everything was going on with the sports concussions in Colorado, or well, in the United States, when it came to the NFL, NHL, and NCAA being litigated by this law firm that was seeking, some responsibility from these big organizations around these athletes who'd had continual concussions that were leading to potentially suicide, the CTE that everyone was talking about at the time. And so that became a big topic. So I got very interested in really understanding, like, okay, I had this experience with concussions. My friend was a football player, and my other friend, he played college lacrosse and had been an alpine skier also, so multiple concussions as well. And it's like, there's some kind of connection here. There's got to be a connection here with suicide and sports trauma. And then looking at my life too, of like how I'd struggled with these concussions and how I'd struggled with the sports injuries and that mental piece. And so that's when I really decided that I was going to try to learn from the best of the best in the industry at the time to really figure out this puzzle, and really hypothesizing that this trauma reprocessing technique would be good for these individuals suffering with concussions like it had been me. And that perhaps there was something there with reversing this damage, or being able to implement this concurrently while someone's playing in sports, so that they don't have to have these negative symptoms, so they can optimize their brain again. And that also with Dr. Daniel Amen's work, I went on and did his practitioner training because I was really curious about that and the brain scans. And that's when I brought in the Wabi QEEG brain scanner, which was a device that their lead physician, Dr. Frank Palermo, had worked with the Colorado Avalanche and the US ski team. And the device was all about looking at reaction time regionally within the brain, as well as overall voltage and where the nervous system state was. So high beta brainwave, that's sympathetic, that's trauma response. And then the low end of the nervous system, or the parasympathetic dominance, is theta brainwave, which is rest and recovery and right before sleep. But in the middle is that alpha flow state, right? And so that's where we want to be. We don't want to be up here high and sympathetic. We want to be right in the middle and have that resilience and flexibility. And so this device was very specific to what I was trying to prove or reverse or assess, and then assess like the treatment modalities and actually see if they work. And so that got me with the QEEG device. And so I started working with this trauma reprocessing technique and utilizing the QEEG device to actually see that, yes, we can enhance the reaction time and the brain communication, and we can decrease the beta theta ratio. So we're not pinging all the way up and coming down, that we're just staying in that resilient alpha brainwave, and increase the blood flow. Like that's Daniel Amen's work around, there can't be neuroactivity unless there's no blood flow. So QEEG is assessing the neuroactivity, where the SPECT scans that Amen was utilizing and looking at the topographic, where the picture was blood flow. Well, we have a topographic and picture also on the QEEG. So they were very similar presentations when we were looking at concussion or other mental illness diagnoses. But you could actually, with the trauma reprocessing, bring back the blood flow, the neurocommunication, drop someone back into that resilience alpha brainwave, not stuck on in this high sympathetic inflammation response, which concussions are prolonged inflammation essentially of the brain and the gut, because the brain and the gut work together. And so you're actually able to calm the nervous system and get someone back to the enhanced reaction time, the brain regional communication, and staying within that alpha flow state. So it was really cool to start to see that technique. And then concurrently around that time, I was introduced, he was the athletic trainer for the Colorado Avalanche, the hockey team, for years. And he introduced me to the near-infrared red light therapy. And Dr. Michael Homlin's work out of Harvard, it's the photomedicine clinic that's associated with Harvard. And he was putting a light on the brain and what it was doing. And so that combined with the trauma reprocessing technique, we were able to increase the blood flow that way, stimulate the mitochondria, or the powerhouse of the cell, to get the brain healthy again. It was able to inhibit the microglial from overpriming. So with concussions, the microglial are, it's in all of the whole body, but very specifically in the brain, it like cleans up the brain. It detoxes the brain. And so it becomes hypervigilant and starts attacking the brain when there's too much inflammation. So the light therapy actually inhibits the microglial from the overpriming, so it's not attacking itself and causing that persistent inflammation. And then it also just decreases inflammation because it gets us to produce nitric oxide, which is an antioxidant that combats the free radical of cortisol, or the inflammatory hormone. And so that, combined with the altered consciousness state trauma reprocessing, was very effective. And then I layered in the audiovisual entrainment, which I used the Mind Alive device out of Canada. And that was Dave Seaver who created this device. And it's just flashing lights and thumping patterns in your ears with headphones, and the little ear clips that stimulate its cranial electrical stimulation, which actually stimulates your nervous system to go more parasympathetic dominance. So again, calming more inflammation, calming more cortisol, getting you out of high beta brainwave or sympathetic dominance where that inflammation cortisol's at. So the combined of the three really became like this amazing trifecta of recovery for the brain. And so it was through all of that. And then I also started going to the American Academy of Neurology sports concussion conferences, which were very new at the time when I started my practice, and listening to Dr. Jeffrey Kuchar, who he's a neurologist and psychiatrist who works with the US ski team, the NFL Players Association. He has his own clinic in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a satellite clinic in Park City, Utah. And so his model, combined with Dr. Mickey Collins, who was out at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, he's a neuropsychologist, and really started to see that we needed to have this integrative model. And so it was the three integrations of what I was doing, which they talked about. Yes, the trauma reprocessing therapy is amazing type of psychotherapy, because we find that psychotherapy alone is very effective in treating concussion, because when we allow for someone to actually talk about the experience and go back through this experience, we get ourselves out of that trauma response, or that shock that we hold on to, and that predictive survival mechanism within us of thinking that it's going to happen again. So we have to be ready. So we're braced and we're taught within our nervous system. And we have this actually like the duromotor sheath around the brain and the spine actually tightens and goes into like a torsion after trauma. And so we can release that torsion by doing the trauma reprocessing. And so they also put in their integrative model vision therapy. And that's more like the neuroocular aspect of the brain, which the brain is almost all neuroocular. It's almost all visual. That's one of our primary defenses, essentially, for survival, because that's really our nervous system's just made for survival as, you know, a being. And so it's like every bad thing that happens, we kind of hold on to that, predicting it's going to happen again. So what we have to go through is reprocess the past so that our nervous system calms back down and resets its homeostasis. And then they also talked about with the vision therapy, when we endure a concussion, those little neuromuscular pathways, just like muscles, like when you break your arm, you don't just put it in a cast and then go out there and start playing again. You go back through the physical rehab aspect of things. So we actually had to rehab these little neuromuscular pathways to get the brain healthy again, because it would have a hard time stabilizing, and that would cause more alarm of that sympathetic nervous system state going, we're not okay, when we were unable to stabilize our visual path. And so they found, it's out of Stanford, they had this interesting device. It's called the eye sync, where you put on these goggles and draw a circle with your eye. And it actually, that's the smooth pursuit. 80% of the time with a concussion, smooth pursuit is messed up. And so in a minute, you can actually know if the athlete has a concussion, because that they will not be able to draw a beautiful little circle with their eye and following this little light ball that you do to make a circle. And so it was really interesting seeing their integrative model within and around working in that neuroocular aspect, doing the psychotherapy, the trauma reprocessing piece. And then also they talked about integrating back in exercise immediately. Because what we used to do, and what Dr. Mickey Collins and Jeffrey Kuchar call is the oven, is we used to have athletes just sit out and bake in those symptoms, right? So, oh yeah, don't look at screens, don't do anything, just sit in a dark room. Well, all that does is decondition these little neuromuscular pathways more and deconditions the body. Well, when we're deconditioning the body, that blood flow is decreased to the brain, all the good things that are associated with exercise. When we talk about human growth-derived hormone, when we talk about, dendrite production and neuron pathways and so on. So they started seeing that, hey, we're not putting people in a dark room anymore. We're pushing them to symptoms always. So we're getting them back into school. We're getting them back into practice. They're not doing, contact stuff, but they're still going to start getting back to doing that cardio. because we really want all those good processes happening. There's also this thing called the NRF2 detox pathway. Well, that's like you strengthen that by exercise. So here we are again with the concussion piece. If the brain's not detoxing that tau protein every day and not detoxing just the normal toxins that it cleans out every day, we're getting more inflammation, more backup. That microglial is getting even more out of control. So it's really interesting to see these guys putting this model together. And then you have the Holmlund's work from Harvard with the red light and infrared light and putting that on the brain. Then we've got the audiovisual entrainment stuff. And then just like I said, the altered consciousness reprocessing and desensitizing work, because you reprocess the past injuries and trauma and traumatic event. And then you go into the worst case scenario of putting an athlete back in and then potentially getting hurt again. Because you can desensitize the nervous system so it's not predictively going, oh no, we're going to get hurt again. We're going to get hurt again, which starts to inhibit reaction time and starts to inhibit fluid movement and our utilization of our fine-tuned motor skills that we've practiced since we were like 5 years old if we're an athlete in our late teens, early 20s. So it's all of that together that this is where we are now and utilizing these techniques and seeing people get better, essentially.
I will say, while I was listening to you, there were a few times I kind of just glazed over, and it was like trying to, there's so much information in what you were saying, and some of it, I think, if you're in that, if it's something that really is part of your world, you're just going to really light up about it. But there were a few things, so, I might have rephrased it better, kind of explained to me in a, middle school level of language exactly what you're talking about. But if I understand it, just the basics, like I haven't lived in North America for almost as long as you've been alive. And so I'm aware of the changes that have happened as far as the awareness of the trauma connected with concussion and the long-term effects that promoted, a whole new level of safety as far as those kinds of contact sports. What was new to me in what you were saying and what I started to look into after meeting you was the connection between concussion and trauma and mental health and addiction. Those
Yeah.
were things I didn't connect those dots before. And the other part of it was I it's like this ray of hope that, say a young person has had multiple concussions growing up, that it's not kind of the end of, their productive life, that there are ways now to
Mm-hmm.
counter it. So, I mean, that's a pretty exciting stage of development to be able to. Okay, so this episode, this podcast is really about parents raising young boys. And boys in general have a natural need to be active, like to move their
Yes.
bodies. So many, many parents are thinking from a very young age, what kind of activity can I put my little guy into? And so, like, from the parent's point of view, with all the understanding that you have about the possible downfalls of some particular sports or whatever, how would you help a parent make decisions about their young child? So I'm talking, from say 6 up through 12.
So the exciting thing that, my first mentor was the lawyer who did litigate the NFL and NHL on the concussion issues. And the idea around that was not just for money or even necessarily treatment for these guys, because they never ended up paying for any of those guys to get treatment, because that's just how things go. But it was that we don't want the kids doing really extreme contact sports. We don't want them tackling during practice. We don't want them, we want them to have that full week in between playing a sport and playing again to potentially, if they did get hit, we know at least about a week, 2 weeks. If we have our kids sit out, we know the brain will just actually recover. And so that's what's been some of the interesting things that have come about with more safe sport and this research and knowing what we know now, right? So really it's that, sports are healthy for kids. They are okay. We're getting better equipment where we have even more stabilization of the neck. We've got these neck band things now. We've got these mouthpiece things. All these things help to an extent. But it's really looking at what is kind of scary still in athletics and is kind of needs to be a paradigm shift. And it's something that I really learned in undergrad within and around my sports injury stuff. It was always like train smarter, not harder. So a lot of times we still have a lot of coaches that think the more you train, the better you're going to be. And that's just simply not the case, especially not with kids. So kids, they cannot keep up with muscle gaining. Their whole body, their brain, everything is growing so fast that it is really difficult for them to even get enough sleep to go through the tear down and rebuild process. So when it comes to sports, I'm going to burst everyone's bubble here of your kids do not need to be in the same sport year round. Absolutely not. We don't even want sports specialization until they're 17. Because we want them using all different neural pathways. We want them doing different things all the time. So even though people think, if I want my kid to be this best hockey player, they're going to do winter season, then they're going to do a camp in the spring, then they're going to do summer, then they're going to do fall. It's absolutely not the case. That is so inaccurate scientifically. We will, okay, if they want to play that season, have them play that season. But you need to be putting them in different sports. And you need to be giving them time to just play and enjoy and do like outdoor activities and just play, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot nowadays that is just terrifying that we're doing it the wrong way in that sense. Your kid is not just going to be better if they're playing year round. That is just not going to happen. They are actually going to get overuse patterns and injuries and be way more likely to sustain multiple concussions and not have the time to heal. And what we do know too with that is that when it comes to, this timeline of healing from a concussion, we know that if a concussion is treated effectively, it will heal each time. But we want to treat them effectively, meaning we don't want them to have the risk of getting their head hit again. So no contact for up to 2 weeks would be best. We know at 1 week, typically kids heal, but I would be safe and say in 2 weeks. And sometimes as the parents, you are going to have to go against some of these coaches. And for me, it's like, it's my kid, I would go against a coach. If the coach is saying, oh yeah, well, he'll be fine in a week or whatever, it's like, I would err on the safe side and have 2 weeks there. And then also, if the kid is still having symptoms at all, absolutely not. You wait until there are no symptoms before you put them back in contact sports. So we know the brain will heal. The other thing is if you know your kid has a concussion, speaking with a psychotherapist just one time, and there's all sorts of psychotherapists, consultants, counselors that are specialized in sports and health psychology, but just speaking with them one time had an 80% enhanced recovery rate compared to not at all. So that would be the gold standard advice here of like, okay, at least sit my kid out for 2 weeks. It's like they're not going to miss out on a college commitment or gaining skills or whatever you think that they're going to need to go on to play at the collegiate level. They sit out for 2 weeks. But we know the brain will heal. And if the brain is healed, then they're fine to go back in. If they have symptoms for over 3 weeks, we know that that is post-concussion syndrome. We know something else is going on. We know then that they probably do need vision therapy. They probably do need to see an neuro-ophthalmologist. They probably do need to be assessed by an athletic trainer or a physical therapist or a physiotherapist that specializes in concussions. And so after that 3-week mark, you take your kids to that PT or you take your kid to that physiotherapist or athletic trainer that can do the proper SCAT-5 assessment, which entails like standing on one leg and toe touch and some other actions that we know if the brain regions are not communicating effectively. Also, we attack the first symptom. So if the kid is struggling with vision stuff, the blurry vision, looking at screens hurts their eyes, we typically know that they need vision therapy. So find that neuro-ophthalmologist and put them in vision therapy. and they will recover. It is not that, oh my gosh, they've had a concussion now, and we got to put them in bubble wrap the rest of their life. That's just not the case. But it's absolutely appropriate if they're still having some of those symptoms to have them go out and take a jog around the field or go on a hike or something. That's totally fine. It's not that the risk of hitting the head again.
Okay, so I have to again, I love the information because
It's a
it's
lot.
things that it is a lot, but it's also very positive. It's very optimistic. And then I'm thinking practical wise, like how do you decide if a concussion, like I know you said a few of the symptoms that helps you understand the depth of it, but say that your son has, say, been playing soccer and he's 9 and he has gotten the ball full force on the top of his head to the point where it's knocked him on the floor and he's gone out for a second. As a parent, so most probably, like you're going to be watching to see, I only know the basics, like if they start to vomit and that kind of stuff that you can say
That's
if
pretty
it's
severe. Mhm. Yeah.
yeah. So then how do you gauge
So
this? So, yeah.
nowadays in hockey and football, we have concussion spotters at the national level. There are people watching to see if someone gets hit hard or goes down or stumbles trying to get back up and stuff, and they pull them out. So at that level, if you're thinking about that, if your kid goes down and that coach wants to put him back in there, that's when you go out there and say, no, I'm advocating for my child. He needs to take a break. It's like, sorry. And I know that's very hard. I know that's scary. I know that's that piece of like, oh, but then the coach won't let him play or this or this. But it's your child,
Yeah.
and there's a part of me that's the social worker part of me that is just this advocating component that it's just like, I don't care what these coaches are telling you. Most of them do not even have an education. If you really look at their background, they will sit there and be like, well, I played and then this. Well, there's PhDs in coaching. So, if these coaches are trying to convince you that they think your kid is fine, no, it's like they're not a doctor. They don't know, and even when it comes to that specialization component, I really want people to hear that too, because that causes all the overuse injuries, that causes the burnout, that causes these kids to put all of their value and worth on that one sport and their performance in that one sport. And so it's really looking at this as the whole child, the whole, the whole human of who they're going to become, if they're going to love to play sports or exercise the rest of their life. I mean, that's what sports were for. They didn't even used to start sports until middle school, until after the Great Depression or World War II time when we went into a different kind of situation economically. But what happened is when all of the resources went to World War II, they stopped all of the middle school sports, and the only sports that remained were Pop Warner football and private pay-to-play sports. And so then that started this process of having younger and younger and younger getting into these sports. And then after that, when they implemented back in, middle school sports and so on, then we had all these private entities trying to push this high level of competitive sport at a very young age. And the reality is that, 90% of an athlete's ability to go on to even beyond high school is genetics. So when these coaches are telling you that I've made Olympians, all my clients have went on to play D1 sports or they've gone on to play national, that's just not true. They've not made these kids. It's not been their model. Because we know with training, we know with all of these things that they just simply cannot adapt that fast. It's like it's beating these kids up. It's getting them like overuse injuries for the rest of their lives. And I can't tell you how many because I've probably worked with over 1,000 young kids at this point in time in my practice, young to 20, they're all kids, right? And the fact is that so many of them have stepped away from sport and absolutely hate sport and won't even go back into sport because they were pushed too hard in these ways, because they never had time to play. They never had time to even just like go and play horse basketball because they're a hockey player and their parents never even want them to touch a basketball. So no, these kids need to play. So when it comes to these coaches, you're advocating for your own kids' health.
It's interesting that I had not thought of the push for sports and athletics having that result, although it's really common, understand that that happens with music. So if you have kids
Mhm.
that are pushed to practice every day, every hour, they'll grow to hate whatever instrument they're working on. So that's a good correlation between the two to keep in mind. Okay, one of the things that you said that I'd like to talk a little bit about, how do you see that father-son dynamic playing into boys' mental health, especially when the father is heavily invested into some kind of athletic success for their son? When I was raising my son, I longed for a guide, something real, honest, and grounded in what boys truly need. So I created the book that I wish I'd had. Packed with tools and real world strategies that actually work, you'll learn how to nurture his emotional world and finally understand the feelings behind his behavior. Because boys don't need punishment, they need guidance. We'll bust the myths that keep boys boxed in and help you support him through the real challenges of growing up. Most of all, it's about transforming your connection, one small moment at a time. Raising boys who become remarkable men. Get your copy today and let's create a beautiful future together. Their intentions are the best,
They are, and I love
but
them, and they love the sport, so they want their child to love the sport. But there's still a lot going on in the sports world of the what we would call toxic masculinity, and it even spills over with the female aspect with that toxic masculinity of you don't cry, you don't show vulnerability, like you get hurt, you just get up and shake it off, and no pain, no gain. I mean, there's all these like awful cultural
yeah.
things that we talk about, and I really see that, and again, thinking all the boys rolling through my mind now of them just thinking that their dad only cared about if they were good at sports, or their dad only cared about that sport that they both shared, and there was a lot of absentee parenting outside of just the athletics. And so I find that if we can get men to not be as forceful within and around that kind of perfectionism, all or nothing, valuing them and being so vested in their result on the field is more healthy and will help that young boy see that he has more worth and value outside of that, and just in general, but also within that connection, within that relationship. And so it's like, yes, you can be proud of your child when they do well, but that shouldn't be the only thing that you two talk about, right? And that shouldn't be the only thing that you put this the compliments and that kind of energy into. As well as I see a lot that when kids are developmentally learning the game and playing and learning new skills, then we hear dad and on the drive home after the game or the practice reiterating and essentially being fairly forceful and trying to further coach after the practice has ended. And again, that's a lot for a child, right? And we have to remember that when we are learning skills, that even when a coach shifts a skill, so like if we're throwing a baseball and the coach is going, I want your shoulder out more like this and more like this when you're throwing. Well, and the kid had been throwing this way, right? So it's going to take at least 4 weeks with muscle adaptation to get one shift of that, changing up that, neuromuscular pattern. And then it'll probably take about another 4 weeks to get that other aspect of what the coach is trying to get them to progress. And that's just natural in sports. That happens. That as they get older, you tweak it a little more, tweak it a little more, tweak it a little more to get better and better and better at the form, right? Mm-hmm. But there's so much of that continued pressure at home and continued coaching and even sometimes just being very hard on and berating them around, well, the coach was telling me to do this and this and this. And it's just, to a child, their body, they're getting to learn how to move their body differently. They have to make adaptations to that. That's a lot going on mentally for them. And so when you're doing that, that can really fracture that relationship, because again, the child is thinking that he only cares if I do good in this. I'm bad and wrong because I wasn't doing it quick enough. The coach already was on me. Everyone on my team was on me. And then now here's dad on me. Where what we really need with dad and mom, because it happens with moms too, is that we need for them to not pick apart what went on in practice and do that over coaching and some of that, because it's just not going to make them better. It's not. Developmentally, they need that time to adjust and for that to set in. And that's sports time, that's practice time. But in the car, we're going to need different dialogue of, wow, you did this great today. You did this great today. What was stressful for you during the practice today? Or what was hard for you? And just really that active listening as opposed to trying to interject and either stop negative emotions, because we want children to be able to come to us and feel that we can express ourselves, that they can say, oh my gosh, I felt so silly out there because I wasn't doing it right and everyone was looking at me. And we just need a parent to be able to just listen with empathy and that compassion, as opposed to and letting the child be vulnerable, instead of coming in with like an intervention of like, well, if you don't want to, feel that way, then you have to do it right. Da, da, da. Like that's absolutely not what is going to create a healthy, intimate relationship with your children. And it's going to keep them from wanting to come to you when there are problems. And that's what we start to look at with suicide and substance use and abuse in athleticism, and even high performers. We know 50% of people who complete suicide never sought help, never told anyone they were struggling. So again, if they get in the car and there's no, you did this bad, this bad, this bad, and they're in their mind very anxiously going, oh my gosh, I'm terrible. Dad thinks I'm awful too. The coach thinks I'm awful. Everything's bad. Everything's wrong. And they're internalizing that instead of being able to express those emotions. That's that 50% that no one even knew they were struggling because they never said anything. It wasn't safe to be vulnerable. It wasn't safe to express those emotions.
So how could somebody else who was intimately connected with that child, who like, there's a center of control, and if, for example, if it was the father who this is his way of showing love and affection and connection is to push his son to, analyze each game in the car on the way home, that kind of relationship, because he feels that is the best for his son.
Right.
Other people that are connected, whether it's the mother or the aunt or an uncle or his siblings, somebody, how can other people that are really close to that child
Counter
give
the
him the
damage.
support?
It's countering the damage, right?
Mm.
So, and that happens a lot. So when we're talking about these athletes at the highest level, they're not going to fire that coach. That coach has been there 20 years and they're abusive. They're abusive. So then it's like you said, having an outside resource, and that's sports psychs, right? So that's our role, right? But then you have these other attachment figures, and it truly is creating that safe space for that vulnerability. Okay, well, how are you feeling about your playing right now? Oh, well, I'm doing, letting the kid just express themselves of like, well, I feel like I'm not doing well. It's like, oh, well, tell me more about that. Why do you feel that way? And so it's just really the active exploratory listening, and it's really our clinical tool of digging, right? So digging, kind of getting to the bottom of things, but just being like, well, why do you feel that way? Oh, okay. And so, or why do you think that? Or what makes you think that? So it's just those kind of like open-ended, really very broad kinds of questions like that to allow for that vulnerability in that safe space. And so that was always like when, parents ask me, how can we support them more? I'm going, don't talk about sports at all. You're getting in the car, you let them vent when they get in there, you let them cry, you let them say that they're mad at coach or this or this or this, and just like, well, those feelings are valid. Like, yeah, it's like you have a right to feel that way. Yeah, and just allowing for. But it really is that. And especially if someone sees this occur. So if it was an abusive coach, not even necessarily abusive parent, and you bring your kid in the car and go, wow, that coach was really hard on him today, you're going to ask him, it's like, wow, well, how did that make you feel when the coach was being so, grumpy today? It's just like, oh, well, this is this. It's like, okay, well, did it make you feel? And if they're really don't want to speak. So a lot of times when I get the young ones in here, I'll sit there and go, well, did it make you feel sad? Did it make you angry? Did it make you feel bad? Because it's okay to feel bad when people say things that kind of hurt our feelings. And so when you just kind of open the door for it and give those examples, sometimes you can get that dialogue coming and allowing for that. Because really in therapy, the whole thing, and even with the trauma reprocessing work that I do, I have them listen to sounds that drop them into a deeper level of consciousness. So they're accessing the memories more fully and accessing the emotions associated. Healing is expression of identification and expression of emotions. That's what healing is. When we talk about, when we talk about therapy, when we talk about our whole role as therapists, as parents within and around supporting emotions, it is allowing for someone to have feelings without discounting them, jumping in and trying to save them from those emotions, trying to control them, not wanting them to be emotional. And I think that's one of the hardest things working with parents that are very good parents with these kids, is that they want to try to interject with intervention and resolution and problem solving with the kids. And it's like, that's not what they need. They just need to be able to express those emotions and cry and do whatever they need to do and allow for, without coming in and trying to save them from having to feel those emotions. Because the feeling is the healing. The feeling is that resilience that we're building in kids.
You said earlier about the unhealthy masculinity components that society kind of perpetuates, and not just society. You'll see it in the media, you'll see it all over the place. So
Oh,
you will get young boys who look up to somebody, and it's usually a sports figure.
right.
And if that sports figure is someone who is, the tough guy that really has the stoic kind of personality, that's also what that little boy is going to take. So, and again, I'm not so familiar with sports so much anymore because our son is older, but like, is that changing? Like, I see
Yes.
changes in other parts of society where men are talking about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the
Yes.
same with sports?
Yes, it is changing. And in the last, because it's been 12 years since I started my practice, things have, we've probably changed about 30%, right? And 30% is huge culturally
Yes.
in 10
Yeah.
years. And so you see it. And there were a couple athletes actually yesterday that were in USA Today talking about vulnerability being their superpower and talking about mental health and how impactful it is to them. So there's quite a bit going on here in LA very specifically, which is amazing. But yes, things are changing. And I think it really, when Michael Gervais came on with the Seattle Seahawks up here, and they started talking about having a sports psych. That was the first mention of any sports psych, and Russell Wilson really talking about how he used a sports psych, and his sports psych actually, unfortunately, uh, passed from cancer in the last couple of years. But he was also one of the first that they started kind of putting in these football teams and having that as a role. So that has changed things. Now most teams have a sports psych on staff to at least do referral kind of work. But I do see it in the media. And I think, a lot of people, social media is bad and these kinds of things. But what it has done, and what I've seen as being like an older millennial, I'm 41. And so I work with all these young kids, this Generation Z, is that they have access to and can consume so many different things than what's just mainstream media. And I think that's actually amazing, because you do have these athletes speaking out about mental health, speaking out about sexual orientation and all these things that were never talked about before. They would have never put back when I was 17 years old, a gay athlete on a, magazine cover. So of course that was another thing that was taboo in sports, right? It's like, oh, you've got to be toxic masculinity, straight man if you're going to be an athlete. And so there was a lot around all of that. So there's a lot of shifts and changes that have happened that these kids can actually find and look up to the athletes that they feel most connected to, and that are being open and vulnerable and honest about these things. Also, just like here with podcasts. So you're hearing all this amazing stuff on podcasts these days about these athletes opening up about their mental health. And a lot of them, it's after the game now, right? Because they feel safe enough, because now here they are in their 40s. They're going, yeah, well, we were 20. We would have never said something like this. But now they're talking about these things and wanting things to be different for their kids. So I do see that things are changing. But it's really just, as parents, because again, it's just like incrementally things change, and it's just the masses changing incrementally that creates this change in our society. And it really is just the father allowing for their children to have emotions and being more emotionally available for them. Because and then this is a skill as well, right? So you look at the different generations of the masculine roles, and it's like you kind of see about here the millennials and down. It's like these men are actually allowing for more emotional intimacy, working on their past childhood trauma so they're not projecting them onto their kids. Because what that really looks like is, as much as we don't want to be like our parents, we will turn exactly into and do the bad things that they did if we do not work on those things and those hurts and pains that didn't serve us as children. And so it's like, I love it when you hear these guys talking about like, oh yeah, well, I went to therapy and working on myself because I wanted to be a better dad to my son than my dad was. And it really just starts with having these conversations and allowing for vulnerability. And I think that's like, if anyone can take anything away from all this, it's allow for vulnerability. Emotions, and you see it. It's like the second someone starts crying, you're just like, oh, what's wrong? Are you okay? Okay. It's like, we got to stop. Like, crying is actually nervous system wise. It's like, it like cleans out the brain. We release cortisol. It's like magic. It is healing. Crying is healthy. And you really see when we start at like 3 years old with a little kid that throws a tantrum, we start shaming them and telling them it's not okay. Well, it's like they're unable to emotionally regulate. So it's actually okay. And if you let one throw a tantrum in the corner, because again, I taught skiing and swimming for years, they actually regulate themselves and come back over like nothing happened. So it's quite interesting to kind of watch that physiology process. They turn red, they're crying, and then they're good. But shaming them and beating them or punishing them is not what we want to be doing. We want to just be like, okay, well, you have your feelings there. Your feelings are valid, and wait for their tantrum to stop. And then, because that then teaches them over time that, like, yeah, they can cry. They can not be okay. Like, it's okay to not be okay. And that's a big thing in sports now, that kind of hashtag or whatever. So you are seeing things change. And I think social media is great for some of those things at this point.
Paige, one last thing that I'd really like to just understand better from you. I hadn't connected that there was a connection between trauma and addiction and concussions. So I'm thinking about somebody, for example, an athlete, and they have a lifestyle that is based on addiction, really. And from the outside, it might just look like, oh, that's just, where they are socially. It's their, it's part of the lifestyle of the rich and famous or whatever. But making that when you mentioned something about it and being able to make the connection between concussion, trauma, chronic stress, and addiction, like how
Right.
does that help someone dealing with those things?
So the thing is when we endure trauma, mental or physical, so emotional, so life adversities, being told we weren't good enough, or the head injury, physical injury, even the blown out knee, our nervous system resets to a more sympathetic nervous system state, so higher beta brainwave. Nervous system dysregulation, high beta brainwave, trauma response are mental health symptoms. So that's the anxiety, that's the depression. Where there's an up, there's a down. Anxiety, depression. So that's where we start to get those mental health, mental illness symptoms. So the more trauma we endure and the more our nervous system keeps resetting, then we are utilizing marijuana and alcohol as nervous system depressants to calm the nervous system. So that's how that starts to happen. So when you've had, life adversities and then this concussion here, and you have neuroinflammation, so your brain regions aren't communicating, you're going to be depressed. So then you are going to reach for these things that are going to help calm the activation, but that's that anxious depression symptoms they're having.
And is
And
that
so then,
something, so sorry, but is that something that what you do and all of the tools that you have, is that something that you can help
yeah,
somebody?
yeah.
You can.
So with the trauma reprocessing, when you reprocess it, express the emotions, go fully through the memory, accessing where your body's holding that shock energy, it resets it to a calmer state. So that's the whole point. We're deconditioning what had been conditioned up to this high level of sympathetic nervous system dominance, or fight, flight, freezy is what my kids all call it, fight, fight, freezy, when they feel anxious out there. And so we reset their nervous systems so that you're back in that alpha flow. So you're not having that high anxiety, depression. Like I said, we want the resilience, just a little upset, then we're good. A little upset, then we're good. We don't want the pinging up and down. And then we talk about being stuck on. So being so anxious and the nervous system so dysregulated, like I was, I couldn't sleep. Well, what does sleep do? Okay, anxiety, depression, and lots of other issues. So if we have 80% of concussions have a sleep issue at this point in time, we now know that. It's now literature. Wasn't when I was younger. No one could figure it out. But yeah, so that's what we start looking at these young kids, and you see marijuana is so prevalent here in the United
Yeah.
States. But they're trying to calm that neurocommunication because marijuana gets into the fat wall and it slows that communication. So it just kind of numbs them down.
Okay.
So it's calming that anxiety. But yeah, so that's why. And Dr. Gaber Monte, an MD, he's written
Yeah.
books, all this cool stuff. And that's why he said that trauma is the gateway drug to drugs and alcohol. So that's
So,
that link.
so when you talk about going back to the, original whatever the problem was. So some people that takes years and years and years of therapy, which is why a lot of people don't bother because
Oh,
there's not a guarantee. But if I understood right, from your work, it's usually about a 12-week process. Is that right?
yeah, if you strategically write out your laundry list of traumas and start at the very first one where the nervous system foundation really started and go through each story in as much detail as possible, what emotions that child or that individual felt at the time, and where you're holding that energy in your body. We know fascia holds that energy. You're just literally like clearing it, clearing it, clearing it, and resetting every single time. And it really helps utilizing the sounds. They're bilateral, binaural, they're solfeggio frequency that puts you in the alpha brainwave. So when you're going back through these things, your nervous system doesn't get dysregulated. It stays in alpha brainwave. So you're re-imprinting it at this positive as if it was a positive memory. It's like we can change our current reality based off of our past experiences. It's really cool. And this is all
How
being shown in neuroscience now.
how common is this? Like this is the first I kind of,
I mean,
you know,
trauma. So EMDR was the first one that really came out. And so that was in the 90s. So again, if we're talking Freud stuff was 100 years old of psychoanalysis, it's like it's new.
yeah.
It's new,
Yeah.
right? So, you're kind of looking for people who do EMDR, brain spotting, sometimes like hypnotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming, and those are all the things that I'm trained in that you combine together to create kind of your process with things. But if you're looking for a trauma reprocessing therapist, you're typing that in, trauma reprocessing. But what's cool with the kids is that you can like nip it in the bud, right? So it's like, oh, they got a concussion, they had a bad experience with a coach. Get them in my office at 12 years old. Let's reset their homeostasis, nervous system. They're golden. It's
Mm.
like, so the more that we get in our reservoirs, we say, yeah, it takes a little more time. But if we can just really model to our kids that, hey, this traumatic thing happened. Let's have you go and talk to someone and reprocess this stuff so that it's not going to impact you later on.
So that would
Yeah,
be basically about everything, not just sports.
no, it's everything. We hold on
Yeah.
to it all the same way and reset our nervous system. But what parents can also do is like, okay, so they saw their kid go down in that soccer game, get in the car and say, okay, wow, that was really a hard hit. Can you replay that and tell us exactly what happened in as much detail as you can? You're helping them reprocess that. Because the biggest thing with athletes is that we never actually talk about what happened with the injury. So it's kind of funny when you're working with them, they're going, oh, you want me to tell me the whole story? I'm like, yeah, let's go all the way back. So beginning of the game, tell me, walk your way forward all the way through PT to now. So it's
Mm.
really just opening and telling the whole story because things happen so quickly. We just reset our homeostasis and go into survival mode. So it's not fully processed. So that's why we talk about reprocessing. It has to be fully processed to calm the nervous system back down. So even with like firefighters and like cops and stuff, it's like they should be coming in after pretty traumatic experiences they have and doing this over and over as well to kind of clean their nervous system up.
Well, that was a really good strategy for parents to be able to help their children just by talking it out and working through it in the moment. That's a really good piece of advice. I'm trying to be mindful of your time, Paige, but before we finish up, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had of?
No, just know that the angry man is the depressed man. And so that
Hmm.
can start at a very young age with little kids. So really start if you see your little boy getting pretty angry about things, that's kind of a sign that, hey, something is bothering them. And that maybe, sending them to a therapist or just even providing that space for them to be like, is something bothering you? That kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's basically the same message. Yeah, basically the
yeah.
same message that I give parents too.
Oh, it's
Well,
wonderful.
listen, thank you very much for being on here today. Where can people connect with you and find out more about your work?
Yeah, so all my socials are at Sports Psych Page, and I'm trying to put more content out there to help people understand some of this new nervous system trauma stuff. And then it's just robertsneurotraining.com is my website. So yeah.
Well, I will plug there that, like I said before we started recording, that I did spend quite a bit of time yesterday looking at your videos, and I found all of this stuff really quite fascinating. So I hope people go and look and listen, and because there's some very positive, optimistic things connected with sports and children and concussions and just ways that we are going to be able to move forward better. So I hope people do that. So thank you again. I'm really grateful for your time and the wisdom, and you certainly have a lot of expertise. And I'm sure people will walk away feeling more knowledgeable and more empowered. So
Yay,
thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
So please check out Paige's links in the show notes and remember that the way we show up today shapes the future we create for our children. To the listeners, thank you for being with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, share with a friend, and come back next week for more real conversations about boys. Thank you for sharing your time with me today. Every conversation we have here is a step toward raising boys who feel seen, heard, and deeply valued. If you're looking for more support on this journey, I invite you to visit me at sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll find a link in the show notes. And as always, thank you for being part of this important movement. Until next time, take good care.